So you can ask me questions afterwards, but I'm not related. In fact, Nancy Bass and Fred Bass, who have always owned this store, well, the grandfather did, still own the store. Anyway, tonight I am thrilled to introduce novelist, essayist, Siri Hofstedt. Siri has written a book of poetry, 5 novels, including The Blindfold, The Enchantment of Lily Dahl, and What I Loved, and 5 books of nonfiction, including her most recent book, Living, Thinking, and Looking, which she will read from and discuss this evening. Tonight she will be in conversation with author, essayist, poet Paul Auster. Siri will read, and then the two will be in discussion, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience, and then she will sign books. Help me in welcoming Siri. Thank you very much.
Jessica and I practiced the name, but it didn't quite work. So my name is Hustvedt, a difficult Norwegian name. I'm going to read a little, not the whole thing, but it's one of the shorter essays in this collection. And it's fragments of observations called Notes on Seeing. It's numbered reflections, so you will notice that there will be a sudden leap from one number to the next. Notes on Seeing. To look and not see an old problem. It usually means a lack of understanding, an inability to divine the meaning of something in the world around us. 2. Cognitive scientists have repeatedly conducted the following experiment, and without fail they come up with the same results. An audience is asked to watch a film of 2 teams playing basketball. The observers are given a job to count the number of times the ball changes hands. I have done this, and one has to be very attentive to follow the motion of the ball. In the middle of the game, a man wearing a gorilla suit walks onto the court, turns to the camera, thumps his chest, and leaves. Half the people do not see the great ape. They do not believe that he was actually there until the film is replayed, and indeed a gorilla strolls in and out of the game. Nearly everyone sees the gorilla if he is not given the assignment. This has been named inattentional blindness. 3. Writing at my desk now, I see the screen, but this sentence dominates my attention. In fact, my momentary awareness that there is much around the words distracts me. The blue screen of the computer beyond the white edge of the paper, various icons above and below, the surface of my desk cluttered with small post-it squares, which, when I turn my head, I can read. Habermas, 254 to 55. Meany et al. Implications for adrenocortical responses to stress, scrawled on pink paper. Residue of arcane research. A black stapler, and countless other objects that enter my awareness the moment I turn to them. What is crucial is that I don't turn to them. For hours every day, I have little, if any, consciousness of them. I live in a circumscribed, phenomenal world. An internal narrator speaks and dictates to my fingers which type automatically. There is no need to think about the connection between head and hands. I am subsumed by the link. Were another object suddenly to materialize on my desk and then vanish, I might well have no knowledge of either its appearance or disappearance. 4. Once in an unfamiliar hallway, I mistook myself for a stranger because I did not understand I was looking in a mirror. My own form took me by surprise because I was not oriented in space. Expectation is crucial to perception. 5. There are days when I think I see an old friend in the street, but it is a stranger. The recognition ignites like a match and then is instantly extinguished when I understand I am wrong. The recognition is felt, not thought. I can't trace what created the error, can't tell you why one person reminded me of another. Was the old friend a subliminal presence in my mind on that particular day? Or was the confusion purely external? A jut of the chin, or slope of the shoulders, or rhythm of a walk? 6. We do not become anesthetized to horrible photographs of death or suffering. We may choose to avoid them. When I see a gruesome image in the newspaper in the morning, I sometimes turn away, registering in seconds that looking too long will hurt me. People who gorge on horror films and violent thrillers do it not because they have learned to feel too little, but because they indulge in the limbic rush that floods their systems as they safely witness exploding bodies. It seems that these viewers are mostly men. 7. We feel colors before we can name them. Colors act on us pre-reflectively. A part of me feels red before I can name red. My cognitive faculties lag behind the color's impact. Standing in a room, I look first at the vase of red tulips because they are red and because they are alive. 8. My mother once told me about coming home to find our cat dead on the lawn. She saw the poor animal from many yards away, but she said she knew with absolute assurance that it was dead, an inert thing, and it. Photographs of the beloved dead draw me in. I am fascinated. There is the good, dear face, one that changed over time. It is the picture that preserves the face, not my memory, which is befogged by the many faces he had over the years. Or is it the single face that grew old? Sometimes I cannot bear to look. The image has become a token of grief, and yet there is nothing so banal as the pictures of strange families. After my father died, I found Christmas cards with photographs of unknown people among his papers, happy families, grinning into an invisible lens. I threw them away. Galvanic skin response registers a change in the heat and electricity passed through the skin by nerves and sweat during emotional states. People in white coats attach electrodes to your hands and track what happens. When they show you a picture of your mother, your GSR goes up, meaning in the body. 11. Is our visual world rich or poor? There are fights about this. People do not agree. Philosophers, scientists, and other academics ponder this richness and poverty question in papers and books and lectures. Human beings have very limited peripheral vision, but we can turn our heads and take in more of the world. When I'm writing, my vision is severely limited by my attention. But sometimes, when I let my eyes roam in a space, I discover its density of light and color and feel surprised by what I find. When I focus, say, just on the shadows here on my desk, they become remarkable. My small, round clock casts a double shadow from either side of its circular base, one darker than the other, a gray and a paler gray. There is a spot of brilliant light at the edge of the dark oval. As I look, this sight has become beautiful. Why is a face beautiful? 13. If an image is flashed too quickly to be perceived consciously, we take it in unconsciously and respond to it without knowing what is happening. A picture of a scowling face I can't say I've seen affects me anyway. Scientists call this masking. Blind sight patients have cortical blindness. They lose visual consciousness, but not visual unconsciousness. They see, but they don't know they are seeing. If you ask them to guess what you're holding, a pencil, they will guess far better than people who are truly blind. Words and consciousness are connected. How much do I see of the world that never registers in my awareness? When I walk in the street, I sometimes glimpse a scene for just an instant, but I cannot tell you what I have witnessed until a fraction of a second later, when the puzzling image falls into place. That furry thing was a stuffed animal, and a little boy was dangling it from his stroller. The lag again. 23, we're ahead. Mothers have a need to look at their children. We cannot help it. 24, lovers have a need to look at each other. They cannot help it. 25, sometimes I like to look at my husband's face in photographs because he becomes a stranger in the pictures, an object fixed in time. Over many years, I have come to know him through my other senses too. The feeling of his skin, the changing smell of his body in winter and spring and fall and summer, the sound of his voice, his breathing, and sometimes his snoring at night. When I look at him in a photograph, my other senses are quiet. I simply see him, and because I find him beautiful, his unmoving face excites me. 26. Looking at pornography is exciting, but loses its interest after orgasm. 27. Reading the end of James Joyce's Ulysses when Molly Bloom is remembering is erotic because she gives permission, gives up and gives way. And this is always exciting and interesting because it is personal, not impersonal. Isn't it strange that looking at little abstract symbols on a white page can make a person feel such things? I see her in his arms. I am in his arms. I remember your arms. 28. When I read stories, I see them. I make pictures, and often they remain in my mind after I have finished a novel, along with some phrases or sentences. I ground the characters in places real and imagined, but I always remember the feeling of a book best, unless I have forgotten it altogether. 29. I do not usually see philosophy, with some exceptions, Plato, Pascal, Kierkegaard, and Nietzsche, because they are also storytellers. 30. Some people cannot make visual imagery. They do not see pictures in their minds. They do not turn words into images. I didn't know such a thing was possible until a short time ago. They see abstractly. They remember the symbols on the page. 31. I see can also mean I understand. 32. There is a small part of the brain called the fusiform gyrus that is crucial for recognizing faces. If you lose this ability, your deficit is called prosopagnosia. It happens that a person with brain damage looks at herself in the mirror and believes she is seeing not herself, but a double. It seems that what has vanished is not the reason, but that special feeling we get when we look at our reflections, that warm sense of ownership. When that disappears, the image of oneself becomes alien. 33. I look, and sometimes I see. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have no idea what he's going to ask me.
I haven't shown her the questions.
No, it's a big secret. Okay.
I jotted them down this afternoon. I could have had 100 others, but there are 10. All right. Here's number 1, to follow your lead. Who are you, Siri Hustvedt? Novelist, essayist, art critic, explorer of neuroscience, medicine, and psychoanalysis. How do you manage to distribute the time you devote to these various activities? And does any one take precedence over the others?
Oh. Well, This is an interesting question about curiosity and greedy reading, I think. You once said to me, Paul, that I was addicted.
Addicted to books.
Yes. And he wanted me to stop reading in this particular area. It was psychiatry during one period of my life. And he said, now you have to stop. And I sneaked in a book in a brown paper bag. And Paul looked at it and he said, what is that? And I said, oh, it's just a couple more books on antisocial personality disorder.
No, but I don't mean so much your interests, but how do you distribute your time? I mean, what tells you that today I'm going to work on an essay, or today I'm going to work on my novel, or today I want to write about an artist,
right.
Today I want to write about neuroscience?
Well, as you know, recently I've been working on a novel that I hope to finish sometime, well, before the end of the year. And I also took on a couple of lectures. I just came back from Europe. I was in Europe for 2 weeks, and I gave a lecture at Gutenberg University that I gave the same lecture again in Parma to a group of neuroscientists, which was about interdisciplinary connections among, well, what I think of as related fields, but most people don't. Which is, you know, questions about the self, and when you're working with different, really epistemological models, how do we know what we know is very different in the hard sciences than it is in the humanities, for example. So I set aside, as you know, some weeks to write that lecture before I left, and now that I've returned from my lecturing, I'm going to go back to the novel and try to finish it.
You see, I sometimes feel that you're moving along. I mean, you're always writing a novel. There's never a moment when you're not. But then people call you or write to you and say, well, we would like to invite you to this university to give this talk. And you say to yourself, yes, I would love to do that. And then you put your novel aside and you spend a few weeks doing this new task. Or a museum is doing an exhibition, and they say, we want you to write about this artist. And you say, yes, I would like to do that. Is that it? Mostly from the outside, right?
Actually, it's if the subject interests me enough, yes, I will take it on. But this lecture that I wrote, actually, I could write about anything. I just decided I wanted to do it.
All right. Now, my second question. Living, Thinking, Looking is your fourth book of nonfiction, or fifth, depending on how one counts. Following A Plea for Eros, Mysteries of the Rectangle, essays on painting, and The Shaking Woman, or A History of My Nerves. Now, looking back on the 32 pieces in this book now, how do you feel that they represent an advance or an evolution in your thinking? I mean, what is this book giving us that you haven't given us before?
I like to think, and I actually, I think it's true, that my thoughts continue to evolve. And so the essays in this book, some of them are in a way simpler than others, and they were written in different contexts. I mean, they go all the way from a little piece that was published in Allure to a piece. What
was that about?
That was it's called In the Mirror or
it's about
something.
Clothes, right?
It's about clothing, yeah. And then the most recently published paper, which was published with peer review in a journal called Neuropsychoanalysis. So they're both in the book, rather extreme differences, but I think actually the voice is not terribly different.
I see. I know, well, among the pieces in this book are quite a few that were originally delivered as lectures. I can think of a piece on Morandi that you gave at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a Goya piece delivered at the Prado, and then last year, Siri was invited to give the 39th annual Sigmund Freud lecture in Vienna at the Freud Foundation, only the second non-doctor to be asked. So it's quite a variety of occasions, I suppose, that triggered off a lot of the work in this book. There are literary pieces.
It's true. I was not going to turn down the Freud lecture. This was too exciting, and I spent many months rereading and reading some works by Freud for the first time, and tying it together with insights from contemporary science and attachment theory, things that interest me. So I had a wonderful time doing you were there.
Of course I was there. I had tears in my eyes when everyone applauded. 500 shrinks from all over the world. It was quite amazing.
It was amazing.
All right, now here a little more serious question.
Okay, all right.
Okay, you have talked often about the difference between the first and third person point of view. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Right. In the introduction to this essay collection, I talk about using the first person in my essays as a philosophical position. It is not just, hello, it's me. I'm using the subjective point of view for a reason. I'm really interested in phenomenology, you know, the philosophy of the first person experience. But this does not mean that I'm, you know, against third-person points of view. But the essays that I write are always grounded in my own experience, and I often use my experience as a way to elucidate the argument. It is never for its own sake.
I suppose never more interestingly than in The Shaking Woman, which was a book-length essay of some 200 pages or so. And I think people outside of the world of medicine, psychoanalysis, neuroscience, were a bit confused by the use of the I, which made them think it was some kind of memoir.
Right.
But in fact, you were using yourself as the guinea pig to talk about certain philosophical problems having to do with medical diagnosis and,
yes,
and who we are and how we can try to figure out who we are and the ambiguities of diagnosis.
Yes, it really was a way to use myself as a medical object. I had a convenient and mysterious symptom. I know this sounds strange. I think there were people who wanted this kind of confessional memoir when in fact it's a small, intense examination of how you can see the same symptom from many points of view. However, as you know, in medicine and psychiatry, psychoanalysis and neuroscience, that book has made my reputation.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a masterpiece. But people who are not familiar with any of this were sometimes confused by this.
Yes, it was not an overwhelming popular hit. But that's okay.
Oh, who's complaining? Another question. I just want to talk about your art writing for a moment.
Okay.
Because you have published many, many pieces on art. And you've published essays on a number of classical painters. I'm thinking of Giorgione, Vermeer, Chardin, 3 extended pieces on Goya, who's really one of the obsessions of your life. But also, interestingly, and I think rarely, in the context of this specialization that goes on today, you've written about many contemporary artists. I'm thinking of Louise Bourgeois, Gerhard Richter, at least twice you've written about him, and Kiki Smith, and many others. So my question to you is, do you take a different approach when writing about the old and the new?
Oh.
Or is the job essentially the same? Or, to put it another way, what interests you most in writing about art?
That's a very good question.
Thank you, thank you.
That's a good question, Paul. No, I think that my approach to the visual image, to a work of art, is always the same, whether I'm looking at Giorgione or looking at Richter. And what most interests me is what I think of as actually an intersubjective experience. In other words, an experience that happens between the spectator and the work of art. That is the only place where art comes alive. It is literally animated by this between area. So, and I'm also interested in not only the intellectual experience of looking at a work of art, but the emotional and sensational aspects of looking at art. So that's across the board, old, new.
Old, new, okay, because we've never actually talked about this.
No.
But one thing I want to share with the audience is that the experience we had in the Prado in Madrid a number of years ago, Siri was writing her first extended piece on Goya. We happened to be in Madrid with our daughter, and a friend from our publishing company in Spain took us to the Prado. The four of us were walking around. Siri particularly wanted to study the 3rd of May, you know, the famous big painting, the man being executed by the French. The three of us got tired. We went down to the cafeteria, and Siri stayed with the painting. And I've never seen a human being look at paintings longer than Siri. So then you rushed down and told us what? This is what I want you to tell the story.
So this is one of these crazy art stories, right? It's a crazy art story. But anyway, so when I was looking at this painting, I saw this, you know, foggy, but definitely, I thought, present image of a face, probably Goya's face, hidden in the canvas itself. And I rushed down, I grabbed Paul and my daughter and Anna, everyone saw it. So I wrote about it then, and it turned out that this had never been seen before.
200 years old.
You know, it's a very strange thing. And you know, later I went to the curator of the, you know, I got myself into lots of trouble because the last thing that anybody wants at a museum is some interloper to come in and point out some aspect of the painting. The long story of this is that there were many other people who then were sent to it and saw this image. But what's most interesting is not that I found this face. What's most interesting, I think, is just what Paul was saying before, that so many people, and even people working in art, that's all they do, don't actually look all that deeply at the paintings. And I was just in Munich. I did a conversation like this about a beautiful show at the Pinakothek, the Moderne Pinakothek, and it's Picasso, Beckmann, and de Kooning, Images of Women, and I wrote a catalog essay for them. And the curator was saying that she knows a lot of people working in museums who don't spend a lot of time looking at what, you know, they're putting up. So that's the end lesson, I think.
You gotta look.
Look hard and you'll find strange business.
All right, here's my next question. Psychoanalysis, yes. Neuroscience, yes. But can you tell us something about your adventures in the new field of neuropsychoanalysis? Because I don't think most people know what that is.
No. Neuropsychoanalysis was given birth by really a man named Mark Solms, who's become a friend of the two of us now. And it's really a way to put together in the subjective and the objective. So psychoanalysis, of course, involves someone's story. And Freud's insights, which of course he was a neurologist. He spent 8 years working in working on cells in a lab. So he came out of a natural science tradition, and he always felt that sooner or later biology would prove him right or wrong. So neuropsychoanalysis is not as strange a sistering as one might imagine. But it's very interesting to me, as you know.
Because you've told me, and all I know about all of this comes from Siri, because I don't read the 2,000 books every month that she reads, but that a lot of Freud's intuitions have been proven to be correct by neuroscience.
Well, I mean, this has to be framed for if there are any neuro people out there. You know, there really is no overarching theoretical model for brain processes. Nobody quite knows how it works. Nevertheless, there's a lot of data, a lot of empirical data, and the empirical data suggests, for example, a number of Freud's insights are compatible with insights in neuroscience. So a very simple thing. 1895, Freud writes to Fliess that, and he uses this word, Nachträglichkeit, which was translated by Strachey as deferred action, but what it really means is afterliness. In other words, the way we remember the past is through the present, and our past memories are always shifting. They are not fixed. Okay? This was not an insight thoroughly unique to Freud either. A guy named Wilhelm Wundt said the same thing, and now in neuroscience, this kind of shifting aspect of memory seems to be absolutely true. Another interesting thing is that Freud's drive theory is quite compatible with someone like Antonio Damasio or Jaak Panksepp. Both are neuroscientists working on emotion. So there are a number of things where they seem to be quite in harmony.
Well, I find it extraordinary. I mean, that you can put these two fields together and really start to try to make better sense of everything. All right, a new question. In your new book, there's a long, provocative essay called The Real Story,
oh, yeah.
which examines the differences and similarities between fiction and memoir. Can you briefly tell us where you stand on this question?
Well, for years ago, I mean, the essay starts in this way. Years ago, there was an article in the New York Times about the explosion of memoir. It was the New York Times Magazine, and the journalist writing it said, you know, if Proust were writing today, remembrance of things past would be a memoir. This annoyed me so much. I found this so irritating that it had festered for years. And when I sat down, this essay kind of poured out of me. And of course, the question is linked to memory. How do we remember? What is a memoir? How is it different from fiction? And in the essay book, I do talk about the real, genuine similarity. I mean, I think the faculty of remembering and the faculty of imagining are actually the same faculty. So think about it this way. When you recall yourself in the past, you have to recall yourself in a way as an other. You know, it's not the same as the here and now. And we all fantasize and project ourselves into the future. This is really the origin of fictional activity, is that projection of the self into the future. The future is a fiction. So that flexibility going from the past, which is, as I said before, shifting, not fixed, and into the future is the source of imagination. So memoir is as iffy as memory itself. But the one thing that a memoirist has to do is, I think, not lie. We all know what lying is. It's double consciousness.
Even if they make mistakes.
You can make mistakes. You know, if you look at some of the greatest memoirs and confessions, Rousseau remembered things wrong. I mean, scholars have gone all through the confessions, and they know that he got dates wrong, he got things wrong, he exaggerated. But he was, I think, to the best of his ability, remembering everything the way it happened. Rousseau is not an out-and-out liar, for example. Whereas someone like, what's his name? The Million Little Pieces person. Lying. I think that's not good. So it's about memory, but it's not about documentary truth.
All right, moving along. For the past several years, well, we've already know this now, you've been giving lectures in numerous cities around the world, particularly in museums such as the Prado and the Metropolitan, but also at academic conferences at various universities. Now, you have a PhD in English literature from Columbia, but you don't teach anywhere, and therefore you don't have any so-called lofty academic credentials. So has this helped you or hurt you as you have walked into these worlds as an outsider? Is it good to be an outsider or bad?
It's a double thing, isn't it? I mean, I've published a couple of times essays in these academic journals, these very serious places, and every time that it's accepted, everything goes well, and then at the end they say, and you have to send us your affiliation. And I write back and I say, I have no affiliation. And they keep, these people, they simply don't accept it. It happens every time now. They just say, you forgot to put in your affiliation. I said, I have no affiliation. And I was just in Pisa, and at the, you can say it, Normale, but Scuola Normale. And the woman said that Giordano Bruno had the same thing. He said he was at the university, the Academia of No Academia. So that's me. This is helpful in the sense that I am not competition. I'm not competing for grants or money. I'm an outsider that interests people working in these various fields because I bring other perspectives to it. So I think mostly it's been a help, even though in the beginning people's eyebrows go up and wonder what this novelist is doing wandering around at conferences and things like that.
They're getting used to you now,
But then when they realize that I actually, as some of my friends say, I have a good working knowledge of neuroscience, for example. So this helps.
All right, okay, all right, I agree. But, all right, my next question, though, not a professor, but not a man either. Have you ever found it difficult to find yourself the only woman in the room? Or to put it another way, talk a bit about how women are treated in the literary world as opposed to the academic world.
Oh yeah, well this is an interesting thing. I actually took a little scene from my life in neuroscience for a novel, The Summer Without Men, when my heroine finds herself with a group of neuroscientists, all men, and this happened to me too, and they were discussing the fact that they said only human women have orgasms. And I said, how is this possible?
You mean men do too. You're talking about other animals.
In the female animal world, it's only female human women, they said. I said, this seems crazy to me. How can that be? No, they said, no, that was true. It was absolutely true. And of course, I went and did the research. It is not true. It is simply not true. So there's one little moment. But in the literary world, of course, if you are a male writer, it helps. It just helps. I mean, I think every woman novelist in the literary world knows it. And my theory is this. If the problem is that literature, poetry, the humanities, it's already kind of femmy. So that what you want to do is you can counter that feminized sense of literature if you're a man. Just the way a woman doing physics is countering her own femininity by doing physics. I think these, and I know this is kind of funny, but at the same time, I think these metaphors go very deep. And there's a beautiful book by called Metaphors We Live By, I think it's Lakoff and Johnson. And they talk about these deep embodied metaphors, and I think this division of masculine and feminine runs very deep. And it goes, certainly in literature, this is true. I mean, there's some idea that women write a certain kind of book and men write another kind of book, and the books that men write are more serious. It's just, it's the way it goes.
Well, look, we've been talking about this for 30 years. I just wanted to hear you, air it a bit out in public. All right. Your books and essays have had a strong impact on the world of neuroscience. We're back to this. And the best of them, Damasio, whom you mentioned before, Oliver Sacks, Vittorio Galeazzi, have embraced you as an important colleague. And what do you think you have added to the discussion? Is it your philosophical background, your interest in bridging the gap between disciplines, or both, or something else?
This is a funny expression, but I was in, when I was in Parma, I just gave a private talk to the neuroscience department, and there was a young Norwegian journalist who had followed me from Pisa to Parma, and she did a little interview with Vittorio Galeazzi, who's one of the neuroscientists there who discovered mirror neurons, if you know any mirror neuron people out there. But and Vittorio said, she said, well, why are you interested in listening to this novelist? And Vittorio said, well, Siri's like yeast. She makes, ideas and conversations grow. And I thought that was really nice.
Well,
the yeasty person.
Very tasty bread that comes out of that. All right, I'm going to ask only one more question, then we'll open it up. You did mention it before, but my question is, what next? I know you've been working on a novel, your sixth, over the past 2 years or so, but no one else knows. And would you care to talk about it without, of course, giving away any secrets? Or is it too soon?
No, I can say the title because I like the title. It's called Monsters at Home, which is kind of ambiguous. And there are multiple narrators with quite different voices, men and women. And I've been having fun writing it.
Good. You must have fun. It's very important.
Everyone has to have fun.
Because you struggle so much. It's so difficult to write, but there is pleasure in it too. Otherwise, one wouldn't do it for so many decades.
You wouldn't do it?
I wouldn't do it.
No.
All right, everyone, let's open it up.
Any questions?
If anyone wants to ask Siri anything. There's a hand.
Paul asked a question about women in neuroscience and women in literature, and you mentioned a little bit of each, but I was wondering, like, the difference. Obviously, well, what you said about women in literature is very difficult, or they're kind of put down. Are you saying that women in neuroscience or science, was it a different experience?
Well, they can have problems too, I have actually a very brilliant friend who told me a story about, she's a neuroscientist and she does work on perception. And she told me about her first academic job. She had actually a man, but a very, very supportive person through her PhD. And she got a job on the faculty, and she showed up for the first faculty dinner wearing just a, not off the shoulder, but just a sort of open neck dress. And the head of the department came over to her, and she had draped a sweater around her costume, and he said, he pulled the sweater over this area of her neck and said, next time dress appropriately. I think that what we have to, begin to think about in the culture is what this idea of, woman as body, woman as nature, woman as the sexual, man as intellect, these very old dualisms that have been going on for ages and ages and ages, and how they still inform thinking, even though I think they're often unconscious. I do not think that we're talking about misogyny. Everybody is not Rush Limbaugh. We're talking about very subtle forms of sexism that people are not even aware of. And there's actually a lot of cognitive science on this. That it's subliminal, and racism can work this way too. So I think, you know, the more conscious people are, the more discussion there is, the better it will be for everybody.
This is something I'm just repeating from Siri, but she says that the main difference she's seen in her travels as a novelist and writer, and then working in the sciences, is that in literature, art, everything is a matter of opinion. And so it is a little like high school. You know, people gang up on certain people and they don't like them. And even if they're good, they might be a little too strange. In the sciences, if you've got the stuff, if you deliver the goods, you're respected. And it doesn't matter what you look like, whether you're a man or a woman. If you're delivering good work, everyone will acknowledge that. And it doesn't always work that easily in literature if you're at the high echelon of production.
Hi, I'm a psychoanalyst, and I'm reading The Shaking Woman and enjoying it. And I'm wondering, in that book you said that you were sort of interested in analytic training, but you were sort of afraid of going into analysis yourself. And I'm really curious how someone who's so immersed in it and so passionate about it, if that's something you're still thinking about.
I'm in it.
You are? Okay, good. How's it going?
Very well,
Good.
I think. No, actually, in the book I talk about visiting an analyst. I don't know if you've gotten there yet, but anyway, I see a psychiatrist, a neurologist, and a psychoanalyst. And as the book evolves, I mean, the shaking has been mostly treated by a neurologist because it seems to be not hysterical. I mean, it seems to be something, we're not sure exactly what, but some kind of neurological problem. But I went to an analyst and I stayed. And for me, personally, probably someone who's capable of insight, as they say, it's been fantastic. I recommend it to everybody. And I have to say this one little thing. I gave a talk in Berlin about art and psychoanalysis, and one of the things I said was that the great myth about artists having their creativity crushed by psychoanalysis, which is a myth in the culture and has gone on for a long time, is of course completely false, because what psychoanalysis can do, or psychotherapy of various kinds, I expect, is create liberation and actually open creativity rather than close it. So, yeah, I'm for it.
Anybody else? Well,
All right, that's good. Thank you so much.